what's it like practicing at Georgia? If you listen to what Nick Saban had to say at media days, I think he pretty much nails it on the head. He said the guy you are practicing against might be better than the guy you play in the game. And I got a chance to spend a lot of time with Carson Beck while he was in, I almost said Birmingham because that's where it's been for so many years, and I've been for so many years, but in Dallas. And one of the things that Carson was talking about was how in 2020 and 2021, he got the ability, particularly in 21, as the scout team quarterback, to go up against. He started naming guys off to me, and he said after a while, so I mean, you know all of them, but he was talking about Jordan Davis and Devontae and Trevor Walker. He talked about Kobe Dean and Quay Walker. Nick Saban's point is correct, particularly if you're a scout team guy. I mean, think back to Stetson Bennett and his 17 season, and how much specifically Roquan and Davin Bellamy, if my memory serves correct, how vocal they were about the look that Stetson Bennett was giving them for the Oklahoma game as Baker Mayfield. So I think this is a critical part of the Georgia story that is left out a lot. Quick background on me for a lot of people. We get so many new viewers. We really appreciate y'all. But the quick background on me, I played 2 sports in college. So that means I went to a lot of practices, which was not always a lot of fun. But it definitely mattered what happened during practice. It definitely mattered how you were performing at practice and who you were going up against. And a lot of my reference point here is from freshman year because we were playing the starters all the time. And the starters didn't always have good days. But your chance when you were going up against the player of the year from the league the year before, or 2 years before, whenever it was, is they're always better than you are. And you get the chance to close that gap by practicing against them 20 hours a week. Okay? Your growth, I can definitively say this, your growth from freshman year to sophomore year, or whatever your first year is in the program to your second year, I wouldn't say it's astronomical, but you can actually feel it. Like, it's noticeable. It's something that like stuff that you had to get used to in year one, that's gone. And at Georgia and Alabama specifically, I'd say probably Ohio State would also be another one. Maybe Michigan in this most recent year, but those 3 schools specifically, and perhaps in the future Texas, you're going to get the opportunity at practices to really do stuff that other people, are not doing in practice. And people are like, well, it's practice, the old Allen Iverson thing. Well, I think when you're like in professional football, maybe that's one thing, or professional basketball or whatever. But practices matter a lot in college. And you're talking about you're going to be at a place for probably 4 years or 3, and you're doing something every single day. I mean, the NFL, they basically practice 1 day a week. What folks watching this would consider practice. They do that 1 day a week. So, Nick's point here, the guy you're practicing against might be better than the guy you play against in the game. Yeah, I think that's the case for Georgia. Anywhere from 30 to 60% of the time. That's a pretty wide range. But when you're playing LSU, the guy you're practicing against is probably not better than the guy in the game. But against in some instances against maybe Kentucky, Florida, Auburn, there are going to be situations where the person that you're practicing against is better than the other team's better players. I mean, particularly when you're going ones versus ones in particular, I would say 1v1 Georgia in practice, you're going against a better player 80% of the time. And but that's not usually how practices are. Hey, make sure you're taking advantage of our newsletter. The link is right down below. You get everything for free, there's no cost to it. The link is right down below. Make sure you're taking advantage of that. The season is here for those of us that do this. So you're going to see a lot more content. Make sure you're getting our free newsletter. The link is down below. Make sure you're signing up for that today. I can't stress enough how important development is in college football. Brock Vandagriff is a guy that over the last, let's see, 22, 23, the last 3 years, Brock has been at Georgia developing. He's definitely been playing against better players than he plays against in games, because when he's gone into games, there's been blowouts. And he's going up against Georgia's number one defense almost every snap that Brock Vandagriff went up against, probably 80% of the snaps that he took in practice when it was in that situation was against the ones, because he's the two or the three, whatever. They rotate these things. The thing about it is, I think that there's a misconception about, if you're the backup, you're getting snaps with the ones. Like, that happens. Why? Well, I mean, there's two reasons: injury and then development. It's both those things. I mean, you don't want the number one's arm to fall off, that's not going to happen either. But you get my point. And so I think, with what Nick's talking about, there's been no coach in college football history that's a better coach than Nick Saban. He knows totally what he's talking about. Best coach of all time. Has been, for some time. But, there's just it's simple. It's math. It's development. It's can your guys get better, during practice? And I would say the answer to that is yeah, for sure. And at Georgia, at Alabama, and at some other places, that one sentence that Saban's talking about here, the guy you're practicing against might be better than the guy you play against in the game. If you're the backup, that is definitely true. If you're the ones, I would say if you're going against the ones, yeah, that's probably true as well. But, Georgia's talent, I remember being on the field. It was Fletcher Page and I. We were talking about Brian McClendon had just led Georgia to a win over Penn State in the bowl game. It was the Gator Bowl. Kirby Smart had been hired 30 days before that, and 25, whatever it was. And Fletcher and I were sitting there talking, and we've been doing this for we started our journey in 2010. So we'd seen it. We'd seen a lot of behind the scenes. We'd done tons of recruiting trips and all this stuff. Georgia's problem was its roster. It had, I wouldn't say gaps, but it had missing pieces. And that's not good enough when you're trying to win at all. When you're trying to win the Gator Bowl against Penn State and James Franklin, you can do that with gaps, because they're not that great. But when you're trying to win the national championship, Georgia's played for the national championship 3 times in the last, I think, 6 years, 7 years, 6. In the last 6 years, they played for it 3 times. 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, excuse me. 3 times in the last 7. DeKalb County math. But I'm not aware of who has played for it more in that time. Alabama's played for it as many, I think, which is also 3. But that happened because of the structure of the roster. And Fletcher and I were on the field, and there were plenty of good players on that 15 team. I mean, guys like Roquan Smith were young, but they were on that team. And, a lot of the players on that team, like Jordan Jenkins, went on to have very good NFL careers. But your starting quarterback was Grayson Lambert. And your starting offensive linemen, I don't think any of those guys are still in the league. Now, it's 10 years later, but I don't think any of those guys made an impact in the league. Maybe Isaiah Wynn. I don't know if he started. I think he did start at that time. So he would be a great example of it. But Georgia's got multiple Isaiah wins now. I mean, do you remember my Isaiah? I remember Isaiah Wynn. A lot of y'all are kind of young. You don't remember who Isaiah Wynn was, but Isaiah was one of multiple first round NFL offensive linemen. Georgia went almost 10 years without a first round offensive lineman. In fact, I'm not sure I remember I don't remember any first round NFL linemen from Georgia. I'm going to keep talking because I don't want to stop and look it up. But lately, I mean, Isaiah Wynn, Isaiah Wilson, Amarius Mims, Isaiah Thomas. I mean, you're talking about multiple people. I'm forgetting people, I'm sure. But I mean, it was John Theus was a 5-star guy. Clint Bowling was a great NFL player. He was not a first round draft pick. Ben Jones for sure. David Andrews. These are all guys that went in the 3rd round or later. And some of them that I just mentioned were really good NFL players. Some of them won Super Bowls. But there weren't multiple ones of them at once. That offensive line that went to Alabama and beat Nick Saban in 2007, that had Chris Davis, if you remember, I don't know if you remember or not, but Chris was really hurt that season. I mean, he had a hard time staying. He was a starting offensive lineman for them that year. I wouldn't say he would never start for Georgia now, but he would have a hard time starting for Georgia now. The guys on that 16 team that started on the offensive line, they would have a really hard time starting now. When would start? I don't remember the rest of that line, but it wasn't anything. I mean, it had Tyler Catalina. No, it wouldn't happen. So Nick's point is exactly correct. And, that has happened over time. That's why that's worked. Over time, Georgia's been successful loading up the depth. What's most important are your top, I would say, 35 players. Okay? If you have the best 35 players in America on your team, you're not going to lose. Georgia had a lot of really good top 10 players on their team. They lost games against Alabama in 12 or, enter the name of any game that was important in that time. LSU in 11, Alabama in 12. They lost those games because they did not have the depth after 25. It wasn't so much the star players. Guys like Jordan Jenkins, John Jenkins, Jordan Jenkins, Jarvis Jones, Alec Ogletree. I mean, they were exceptional college football players, and they were really good pros. Aaron Murray was pretty. I mean, I don't know. He can take up for himself. I thought Aaron Murray was pretty good. He was exceptional. Malcolm Mitchell. They had really good players, but they had John Thea. I skipped Todd Gurley, which is a complete mistake. Todd Gurley was beyond a beast. They had John Thea starting as a true freshman on that offensive line. The last time they had a true freshman starting on the offensive line at Georgia, I think, was Andrew Thomas in 2017. And that's not because they wanted that to happen. I mean, he was just that good. So, could Andrew Thomas have handled Jadeveon Clowney? I mean, I don't know if a lot of guys in college could handle Jadeveon Clowney. That's what you're going up against. But Andrew Thomas, I think, would have, been fine. He wouldn't have shut him down, but he'd have been fine to hang on. And Alabama didn't have like 3 Jadeveon Clowneys, but they had 4 guys that were Jadeveon Clowney adjacent, or in his I don't know about stratosphere, but in his world, and they're all over the place. And so that's how you have to beat these guys. If you're going up against Jadeveon Clowney in every single practice, okay, you would get better from that. And Georgia has something like that now, okay? When you start talking about, if you're defending Brock Bowers every day in practice, if you're defending Lab McConkey, if you're going up against Amarius Mims, trying to execute, whether you're, taking on the offensive lineman and dislodging them, making your tackle, or you have your gap or your assignments, or you're, God forbid, trying to sack the quarterback, getting around Amarius Mims. All of those things are challenges. And all of those things are things that happen at Georgia in practices every single day. Nick Saban's exactly correct, and I'm glad he pointed it out. Thanks for watching.